Hello and welcome back. The game has been out for a few weeks now, and so today, now that we've seen how a lot of people are learning the game, picking up the game, we are going to be doing a video on the top mistakes that new players make, beginners make. Now for this, in terms of top, we are doing it based on frequency, and we are focusing largely on problems that are a result of misunderstanding the game or misevaluating what's important, rather than mistakes that are of a knowledge check type of quality, although there will be one or two of those. We're going to be focusing on how players miss the mark and incorrectly evaluate stuff, just like that guy incorrectly evaluated where he should be in the road. And so for this, we're going to start with the kind of more simple mistakes, generally speaking, that are quicker to explain, and then move to the more complicated ones that require a little bit more unpacking. And so with that said, let's dive in. So the first one is something I think players appreciate, but not enough, and that is just that control is the most important modifier in the game. It throttles how much tax base you get in locations. It will also determine how much trade income you are getting by affecting crown power, and it's also going to affect your ability to wage war by throttling down your sailors, your manpower, and your levy size. All of these are very important, and I think that even if a player recognizes that control matters, they're just really underappreciating how important control is, and basically everything that affects control is also really important. And so proximity downstream is also incredibly important modifier, and if you're just looking at the political map and you're just looking at how much land people have, you're going to misevaluate how powerful they are, and this is going to be a better way for looking at how powerful someone is really kind of seeing how much control they have in locations. And if you see a country like England here, their average control or frequent value of their control is like 20, and so they are going to be a lot weaker than Hungary, whose average is like 30, because Hungary is going to be getting way more tax base. And so just looking at the political map, failing to look at the control map mode, and failing to appreciate how everything that affects control is going to be really important to you is going to be kind of the first beginner mistake that I think a lot of people make. Maybe a little bit of a point of emphasis, but for 300 years now, Hungary has had compounding effects and has been able to expand these types of things. They have a tax base of 2,500. England often will stall out and have kind of a rough start. They only have a tax base of 500. They did have a peak of 800, however, but as it stands, they only have a tax base of 500 here. And part of the reason why it probably collapsed to some extent is whatever made it happen, that they moved their capital away from London, which is the source of all of their control, probably really just bricked their economy. If we look at the tax base, we will see that there is quite a bit of tax base near the capital in their silver location, but overall there's probably more stuff that they could be getting into their tax base in these locations. And so the fact that these locations over here to the east, and so the fact that their source of control, their proximity is over here, is probably why they got super bricked and why they had a collapse of their economy. And this is probably an example of why they're so weak, is the fact that their source of control was shifted in a way that really negatively affects them. I'm inferring this because we haven't kept a close eye on England. It is the AI, but this is perhaps a very striking example of this. I think one of the common ways in which this mistake manifests is underbuilding in the capital and spreading out your buildings rather than just building in the capital, because the capital will, in most instances, be able to have 100 control, and so you will not get down throttled at all by lack of control. So even for players that do appreciate how important control is, I think a lot of people are still underappreciating how important market access is. It is important to note these two are multiplicatively effective with each other. If you have a 50% control and 50% market access, you will effectively get 25% of the economy out of the location, because 0.5 times 0.5, but you can see here Nuremberg is going to have 65% market access. And so it is critically important that where you are building, where you are doing stuff, as it relates to economy, is also in an area of high market access. And so for here, for Vienna, for us as Austria, we want to create our own market. Not necessarily in Vienna, it has to be, but this will give us a very strong overlap of control and also market access. And so what we will do is really just to kind of drive this home, is we're going to create a market in Vienna. Now, we are going to pass the time, and as the first month passes, our tax base is going to go up to like 60, and then it's going to drop down to around 30-ish until the new market comes in, at which point it will be in the mid-50s. And this is going to be an example for just how much stronger you get by doing something as simply as making a market, because we are leading to higher overlaps of both control and market access, and valuing both of these kind of together is extraordinarily important. And so when this market gets created, as we pass on to the next month, we will move into the mid-ish 50s in terms of tax base, which is very near double. We'll wait for one more month because usually we get a little bit above 45, and this is without even doing anything to kind of fix up this market. It's a small market. Demands are going to be a little bit weird. The market's going to be a little bit broken, and as we cultivate in this sort of thing, us having a market capital where we are going to be building all of our stuff because we have a bunch of control there is going to be centrally important. And I think the UI really underconveys how much market access places have. They do have the whole shading thing, but it's easy to just get lost in the sauce and be building in some place on the outskirts and fail to realize that you're only getting 0.6 of the value out of that location for market access, and then if you go to control, you're only going to be getting like 10%, and so this leads to like you getting virtually nothing from building out here as Hungary, except if you are trading the goods. And so it is very, very important to also have a healthy appreciation for market access as it relates to the economy. So this next one is more of a knowledge check, but it's just so critically unimportant and not necessarily intuitive that it's just an absolutely kind of, I think, tremendous leak, which is that the biggest source of your ability to spread institutions is going to be importing from markets that have locations in them that have the institution. And this is the only reason why we are spreading military revolutions. You can stack up a bunch of universities, a bunch of, percentage modifiers, market center, ports, roads, all these types of things, the text, but fundamentally, if you have zero base spread, you will not get the institution, and the most consistent thing with which you get base spread is going to be this. This is how most of the institutions spread. Some of them will also spread with could have spawned institution, but especially if you're playing outside of North Africa / Europe, you are going to be really dependent on trade because most institutions can only spawn in Europe and North Africa, and so this is very, very important that you go out of your way to produce trade. Once you get it inside your market center, so this is Krakow, I believe, in this game, spawned the military revolution. Once it's present in your market, it will spread to all the other locations, and so you don't have to do anything special, but it's very critically important that you import to the market to cause it to spread to the market capital, to get the ball rolling, and do this proactively if you want to have access to institutions. This is really important, and I see some players not doing it, and if you're not doing it, you're just going to have to rely on the passive spread, which can be a lot slower. Just go into any game 80 years in and take a look at Hungary, and Hungary will have like no institutions because they don't import, and if you're in a place that does kind of run institution dry, you're going to have a bad time. So it's important you go out of your way to make these trade routes. In particular, this is a pretty good opportunity to import foodstuffs or pop needs if you can, something like this sturdy grains. These things are very often easy to import. Sturdy grains, furniture, these types of things can be very good to import, especially if you turn off your own furniture production, which sometimes you want to do in order to preserve your lumber, but it's important that you go out of your way to set up trades. And so we could go sturdy grains, hey, we would like to import that from one of these markets. Looks like Krakow will not be that profitable, but it is a route we could run, maybe, or we could run sturdy grains from here. I do think it is present there, so that will increase our spread of the institution. We're not in too big a trouble in this game, but in some games you will be in trouble, and this is an important thing to keep an eye on. The next mistake I see commonly is people expanding by just taking land directly rather than using subjects. Now, to be fair, this has gotten nerfed, but it's important to understand how subject expansion is powerful or why it is powerful, even if you are cutting down on it a little bit less relative to 1.0.7. But that is when you take something and it's conquered, it's minus 10% control, and if you get it to being a core, it's plus 20% control. So that's 30 control. Control is important, and so you want to have, ideally, everything cored. If you just take the land directly, you will either have to wait an extremely long time, or you will have to use the integrate action in order to integrate these locations, and so it pressures your cabinet. You don't really have, especially before you get integrate area and assimilate area, you don't really have enough cabinet actions to keep up with the level of expansion you can do, and so you will fall behind not getting all these areas as cores. But once you integrate the area, it will now be a place that is integrated, which is plus 5% max control, so that's plus 15 control relative to conquered, and you will get an additional 15% once it's cored. Cored, you will either have to assimilate to get to the core, or you will have to come in and accept the culture of the pops that are there. So with that said, expansion via subjects is very powerful because you can just take the dirt and then you can do create subject and create a custom subject. We can't right now because we're at war, but the subject will integrate the land for you, which is what is happening with us with Poitsu, where they are integrating this land. When we assimilate our subject, whatever land is core, we will get as a core, and whatever land is integrated, we will get as integrated. And so by doing this, we offload, just like that guy loaded his ass into that car and started driving fast outside, we will offload our kind of pressure on cabinet actions as a resource onto diplomats as a resource. Now, to some extent, now having subjects is going to cause you to get a trend towards decentralization, so this is another further resource, but this is still a powerful tool for expansion and thinking your way through expansion, I think, even if you are going to be going centralized. And so you're freeing yourself from cabinet actions. Beyond that, it's also important to emphasize that control is important. We would not be able to get much control there. We would not be able to get much tax base out of this location, and the subject income, where we are getting 20% of their income. That is not 20% of their net income. That's 20% of this from a lot of our subjects, minus the kind of subject increase to your, your economic base, effectively increasing the cost of your sliders, minus considerations for that. You will also just generally be generating more revenue from subjects if you would have really low control there otherwise. So coming back here, we have this place, it's all conquered, and the truth is this we would be generating way more revenue if it were as a subject, because obviously 0 times anything is 0, and so we are getting 0 effective tax base, and so it would be better to have it as a subject. We are just planning on integrating this directly in code. That's kind of thing one as a subject, is it's very important for expansion, for getting everything cored up, which is important for control, which is extraordinarily important. The thing too is that your subjects will, if you release historic subjects, subjects that are going to be ones that previously had borders, they will have all the cores that they had before. And we can see here Moravia has these cores. And this is important because with these cores, if a country has cores and they're your subjects, they will create spy networks on nations and they will create CBs. You can use those CBs, and CBs are generally a valuable resource. Very often you have to spend 50 parliament support or a lot of diplomats in other sorts of ways to be able to get a CB. And so the fact that you can use your subject CBs, not only can you use them, they are also very good CBs, is really nice. You can see decreased cost for conquer and subjugate. And so specifically releasing historic subjects with not their full territory. So if we took all of this off of Bohemia at the start, we wouldn't get the ability to generate free CBs on Bohemia, but by taking a small chunk, we also help expansion by allowing ourselves to have more, by allowing ourselves to have free CBs on people using subjects expansions, and these CBs are very strong. And so even if you are not caring about coring, it is still really valuable to have subjects for the purposes of creating CBs. And so this is also an important play pattern as it relates to expansion and subjects. All right, the next mistake I commonly see has to do with failing to appreciate the nature of the income and expenses kind of relationship, and viewing economy and income just really, I think where this really comes from is just like looking at the buildings and seeing that the building says, hey, I'm making this amount of profit, and thinking that, oh, that's how much I get. And the thing is this potential profit, it goes to the tax base. And then from the tax base, if you are taxing on average your state's 33%, let's say you have the building making 100 ducats, you'll be making 33 in income. But the cost of all your expenses scales with the economic base, of which the tax income is a portion of this. And so if you have a total percentage cost in terms of economic base of 20%, let's say, this scales up over the ages, but let's say we're at a point in the game where we are getting 100% of the tax income as economic base. If our slider cost is 20%, then that 100 ducats we added in the location to the tax base, it goes to the taxes, we tax 33%, but then we pay 20 on the economic sliders because they're just 20% of our economic base. And so that 100 income only translates to 13 ducats of income, right? And so it is very important that you kind of try and kill as many sliders as you possibly can rather than paying for max sliders. In particular, I think the biggest culprit is stability. And the reason being is that EU4 stability is very important. EU5, being in positive stabs, not really that valuable. Not being in negative stab is really valuable because you avoid disasters, and this is a really important bit. But staying between 10 and 30 stability, especially because stability decays in a non-linear way, is very valuable. And so I think very often you want to kill the stability slider. Now, if you go decentralization and you don't need the subject loyalty like we needed in this game, which was in 1.0.7 where loyalty was a little easier, if you don't need the subject loyalty in order to get this, and you probably won't need the monthly diplomats, then killing your dip slider can be very good. And so now notice we've gone from having negative income of 6.3k to now being break even here. But also, generally speaking, the culture investment is really not going to be worth it in a lot of cases, especially when you have a lot of artists. Works of art just generally aren't that useful. Prestige is kind of nice, but honestly, the way you get prestige is through humiliating people in peace deals, is kind of the best and easiest way to get prestige. And so if you kill the slider too, you can now see, hey, now we're starting to make some decent money. And also, the cost of court, very often you will be maintaining at max. It decays linearly, so it's not really, it's generally worth staying at 100. But you will see we're under 100, so we have to pay a bunch extra right now in order to get this full amount. We would only need to invest plus 33%. Because we have stacked a whole bunch of positive values in Republican tradition. We're getting Republicanism 0.1, Civic Engagement 0.1 here. We're even using the Strengthen Government Cabinet action to decrease the cost of our sliders. When you add all these together, it will be around 0.66. And so if we did not have this negative stability, which we do, or sorry, this negative Republican tradition or sub 100, we would be paying a lot less. We would be paying like a third what we are paying currently. And so if we adjusted all of our sliders in this way, we would go from minus 6k to plus 7k. And so the overall size of our economy is really big, and so this makes this very swingy. But the thing that is kind of a point of emphasis that I think is not fully appreciated is the slider cost itself is really, really important and will affect things in a really, really big way. And it will make sometimes some things profitable. If you're actually underwater on your the amount you are taxing relative to the amount that you are paying for in terms of slider percent costs. So let's say you're only taxing 30% overall on your estates, ignoring the tax efficiency. But if you add the tax efficiency, that 30% here would be like 42%. But if you're only taxing 30% and your slider expense is 35%, profitable buildings will actually lose you money because they will increase your costs by more than you're taking in, which is not necessarily intuitive, but all of this put together, you just kind of, you want to kill your sliders as much as you could possibly afford to. This is something you should be looking to do, and in particular, the stability slider seems to be the most overrated because I think all the EU4 players are just maxing out the stab and not really appreciating that this is a huge expense, and what you are getting on it in terms of the trade-off via, increasing the state satisfaction equilibrium, it's just not worth it. Pop promotion speed really good early on, but it falls off pretty hard. And so overall in the aggregate, it won't be worth it unless this is allowing events, if you're like over 50 stab to fire, which I don't know if these exist, but if they do, maybe there's some argument, but it's still going to be a very expensive investment in order to be able to pass that threshold. This next one is kind of two-part. The first part is that taking loans is going to be bad, and it is going to be bad off the back of not the interest payments as much as the decreased crown power. And I think that this gets super underappreciated, and you just generally speaking don't want to take loans. The second part of this is if your crown power is under 25%, getting crown power malices is really bad. And so it is really bad because this tax efficiency malice is pretty nasty, but it's also going to be decreasing your trade income. And so it's going to be really, really rough for the economy. And the reason why you might want to, in the early game, take some loans is to buy those really, really profitable buildings. Because at the start of the game, you can have buildings that are getting like 8 ducats. But the issue is several-fold in terms of when you're looking at this and you're like, hey, what is the building making? And it's like, oh, it's making 5 ducats, 2.75 ducats. This building will pay for itself and it will pay for the interest in this type of thing. And this evaluation, I think, kind of misses the mark. We haven't done the math in a super rigorous way. But first of all, this 2.75, this is going to the tax base. This isn't going to the coffers. We're not actually making that much from the building. Instead, we are getting that to the tax base and then we are taxing our estates for it. So, for example, example, the Dimi, we are taxing them 46%, and it is getting affected by our tax efficiency. We have a massive 41%, but what this ends up being is we're only getting half of that value, roughly speaking, from that weaponsmith, when it's going to our best estate, which isn't even the split, and so we'll only get maybe 40% of that value. And so this has to somehow pay for the loan. In the early game, you have really, really profitable buildings, but you have, generally speaking, not so many crown power modifiers, and generally speaking, not as many max tax modifiers as you'd want. And so this means that the building will have difficulty paying for itself in a short regard, independent of the crown power consideration. But if we take 20 loans here, we are getting 5.4K currently in income. This is, if we wait a month, this is roughly how much we'll be getting as well. And if we just take 20 loans, we are going to see this is going to decrease dramatically. Let's 4 more to a 4.3K. So we are making 1 less K, and we see paying interest, we're paying 1K in interest. But if we wait a month, what's going to happen is our crown power is going to go down, and we are going to get a tax efficiency malus. And the tax efficiency is malus will be nastier if you have less tax efficiency. We have 41%, which is quite a lot. And so when February 1 rolls around, we are going to lose a 3% crown power. So we are going to be getting less trade income. We were making, I think, 5.2, 5.3K before. Now it's going to be down to roughly 4.8. Our income is down from 5.4 to now 3.9K, and this is down quite a bit. And so somehow we have to recoup this, not just paying back the money we got and paying back the interest, but also paying for the marginal cost of the loan, because our interest payment only accounts for 2/3 of the decrease in income. And the rest is also what you have to effectively pay for relative to just waiting. And I think people get trapped by this because they take loans, or the people who are taking loans take loans early, and they build these really profitable buildings, but the profit isn't as big as it looks because you're not actually getting all that money. You have to get it filter it through your estates, and you don't really have those modifiers set up at the start of the game. And by the time you escape the start of the game, you aren't going to have all these opportunities where you are making 6-7 ducats. It's going to be down to 2. If you're lucky, it's going to be sub 1, and it's very hard for this to pay for itself, especially when your economy's small early. You'll have to take multiple loans to build enough buildings for this to feel substantive. And so generally speaking, you don't want to take a lot of loans, and I do think loans in general, as a kind of taking loans to try and make money, is something a little bit trappy. Although, to be fair, I have to look at this a little bit closer on the math, but I'm pretty sure that it is going to be bad. Now, we have another early game example because I think it will be a little bit more striking. We are currently getting -5% tax efficiency. Our income is 21 ducats. We're a couple months into the game, just to kind of let some of the weirdness sink in. And if we take loans, we will get 64 ducats, or roughly speaking, 3 months worth of net income from us. If we take 20 loans from the estates here, we will see, first of all, our income will be more than cut in half. Our income will be reduced by about 60%. And so whatever we do has to make up for this fact. And in theory, we would be paying money to the estates, and maybe we are, but as far as I can tell, when we try and diagnose this, doesn't seem to be the case that the interest is going to be going to the estates. And so if we peel off a month here, and let things kind of check out what is really happening, we will be getting, indeed, only 3 ducats a month. And so our income has been decreased by an extraordinarily large margin, and this is because our tax efficiency has been reduced by 10%, and this is more painful the less tax efficiency you have, the less max tax you have, and the more expensive you have on sliders, which generally you will be paying for legitimacy. In the early game, you can see our crown power is down to 9%, and we're getting absolutely crushed. And if we look and we try and see how much are the estates making, it's not going to include in here, as far as we can tell, any sort of them getting paid the interest payments. I'm not sure if this is somehow opaque, but it doesn't seem that they get paid the interest. And so, yeah, sure, we have an extra 1,200 in the bank, or not even 1,200 in the bank, courtesy of taking these extra loans. But this has to somehow overcome the fact that we're getting 18 less ducats on the margin in order for it to be profitable. And this is deceiving because our interest payment is only 10 or 11. And so there is a lot of additional cost that is in there as well. On top of that, generally speaking, in the early game, you are going to be throttled very significantly by your control. Your most profitable opportunities will be in the capital. Generally, you can keep the capital constantly constructing, or you can be constantly throttled by your promotion speed. And so if we take a look, we have this gold pile here. After we expand out the gold 1, we will be waiting on promotion. So our most profitable opportunities will already be saturated. And so the additional loans just to exercise the opportunities aren't going to be very good. The only instance that kind of comes to mind where you maybe want to take loans is specifically if you have a road building parliament. The 20% reduction in road cost is maybe going to be something that is worth it. But even then, that would require doing a little bit of math and checking into. Okay, we have our very most profitable opportunities that will be pretty good, but we had more than enough money to pay for these most profitable opportunities. And if we have more money, it's not like we can expand out the levels of the gold here more, because that won't be useful, because we're going to be waiting for promotions into laborers. And so taking a bunch of money to do a bunch more stuff, and this is with us playing Bohemia, where we have some of the best opportunities because we have gold. Not every country will have gold. It just doesn't really make much sense when you look at it at a kind of a more deep level, not just because of this kind of interest payment, which is something that could kind of be overcome, but the fact that the interest payment gets paired with the crown power malice is going to be very, very substantive. And if we got a bunch of crown power, we would have overcome this, but to be honest, we have basically zero trade income right now relative to what we could be getting, and so the fact that trade income is getting decreased is barely even figuring into this, where we have this kind of close to game start position where we don't have that much trade, and this would look even worse if we had a bunch of trade, although it would look better if we had more crown power and other things. But the important thing is that you don't want to just take in a bunch of debt for the purposes of trying to build a bunch of stuff, because it's not going to be effective. The next mistake has to do with crown power, and that mistake is just appointing the absolute most qualified person possible to cabinet positions. This gives you half the value in terms of cabinet efficiency that is going to be there, but you have to remember this is like marginal value. And so if there's another reason to appoint someone else and they have 50 power or 50 of the attribute, then you will be getting an extra 25% on your cabinet efficiency. And often you will have plus 100% anyways. And so 25% on top of when you already have plus 100%, the 100 base percent, means that you're only getting an additional 12.5% on the efficacy of your overall cabinet action. And this is somewhat a small effect compared to what you can get by appointing someone who is part of the Crown Estate. When you appoint someone who's part of Crown Estate in Cabinet, this will give you, in terms of proportion of the Cabinet, so early on it's way more important because it's fewer Cabinet actions, and so a higher proportion per each, it will give you up to plus 25% crown power. This crown power is often worth more than the extra attributes, especially in the early game. You also get additional crown power for having crown power characters in charge of the army and the navy, but these ones are kind of more straightforward and are such that you're not really losing power, especially if you're at peace. But the cabinet position specifically, I think that it is important to assign crown power characters, and I do see very often that people are just assigning the best person possible rather than, or the person with the highest traits possible, rather than caring about what estate they come from, specifically the crown. There is also a secondary thing here, which is that there's an event that you can only roll, or a parliament that you can only roll if you have burghers in charge. I forget the exact name of it, but this is a parliament that gives you plus 10 to plutocracy. And so also specifically, if you are pushing spiritual, aristocracy, or plutocracy, any one of these values, having at least one member of the corresponding estate is going to be important for being able to push that value better. Generally speaking, it's kind of easy to push aristocracy, especially because you can elevate someone to nobility, and it's kind of easy to push spiritualist, but pushing plutocracy is often very hard, and so you will want to have a member of the burghers within your cabinet, specifically just so that you can roll that parliament. And so these considerations, I think, override just who is the most qualified individual at a fairly high frequency. The next one relates to estate privileges, and the truth is people give out estate privileges. But to kind of unpack that a little bit, on the income side of things, you want to pursue very, very actively sources of maximum tax, just generally speaking. And then stuff like in age 3, you can go for rights of the burghers and go curtail the burghers, for example, to get an extra 10% burgher max tax. And when you acquire these max tax modifiers, this will allow you to tax more, which is very, very valuable because you will be getting a bigger chunk of the pie and you will be extending the margin in a similar way to killing your sliders. Extending your margin is very, very important. But when you do that, you are going to decrease the satisfaction the more you tax, or the satisfaction equilibrium the more you tax the estate, and you want to be above 50. The lower the satisfaction is, the more junk buildings they build. You don't really like that. And so one of the best sources of satisfaction is going to be privileges. And I think people really give these out not as much as they should be, because giving out a ton of privileges is really, really good. And this has to do with the math behind it. And because of that, we're going to need to rely on a tool. It's difficult for us to show this off in game, and so we are going to be consulting something that I invite you, in fact, not invite, but beg, implore, beseech you, that if you have any children, any small innocent children under the age of 38, I invite you to have them leave the room. Lock them in the cupboard, send them outside to play with that nice clown that hides in the sewers. Whatever you need to do, just make sure they're not in the room for what comes next, because of course that's a spreadsheet, so I'll give you guys a moment. All right, so we have a spreadsheet here, or a sheet within the spreadsheet, which is publicly available. It should be in the description below. I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying it should be. But this is going to calculate estate power for us based on the inputs we have, which are going to be the power percentages and also the amount of pops of each profession. And so this is going to give us power. Notably, for those of you kind of watching the channel, following the stuff, it actually turns out that you don't always automatically have 50% crown power. Apparently there is a base power now for, and I don't know when this was changed, for pops applying to the crown power estate. And so theoretically speaking, the more upper class pops you have, the harder it is for you to have high crown power. But with that said, we are going to be taking a look at what happens when you hand out more and more estate privileges. And what the truth is that, or the way that this works is that we can think of the percentage power concession we give from a privilege as being a cost that we pay to slot in the privilege. And you can see here, if we are thinking of handing out privileges to the nobility, and with this status quo where we have no privileges to the nobility, we actually have quite a lot of crown power. We have 43% crown power with this setup, okay? And if we hand out some amount of privileges, this 43.5, if we hand out 100% privileges, we see that that's very expensive. We'll call this 36%, but that is going to be a 7.5% cost of crown power to add 100% power to the nobility. So, to jump into game real quick, that is just handing out even as little as one singular privilege, depending on what the privilege is. Some of these cost 100%. So, handing out feudal mercenary contracts, man, this looks expensive. It looks like it costs 7.5% crown power. Now, the thing is that it will get cheaper and cheaper the more you do this, because you are splitting a pie, and it has to do with the ratio of crown power to your other powers. And so as you add more and more to the nobility at a higher percentage modifier, you can think of it as being, right now they have equal power, roughly 35%, right? If you were to full on double the noble's power, you would then be at a 2-to-1 ratio, and then this would become a third instead of 50%. And so what we see is if we add another 200%, because it has the base 100% plus another 200%, this will actually only be half of the nobility in terms of power. But now we've doubled the amount of privileges. And so let's come back to this plus 100% real quick. We're both at 35%. The first 100% cost us, the first 100% power for the nobility in terms of handing out a privilege cost us 7.5% crown power. But if we look at the second one, the marginal one, we notice something that's a little bit interesting. that only cost us 5% crown power, or 4.5% crown power. And so for every 100% privilege you give out, it will be a smaller and smaller cost. We see 30.5% in terms of the cost, moving down to 26.5%. So this one only costs 4%. And then kind of the next one, 26.5 down to 23.5. This one only costs 3%. And the more and more privileges you give out, the cheaper and cheaper they become in terms of crown power cost. And so what this means is that you either want to have 0 privileges or close to 0 privileges, or you want to have a ton of privileges. It's kind of a double equilibrium, and because privileges are so good, because being able to tax people is so good, you want to give out gobs and gobs of privileges. Whenever the satisfaction that whenever you can give out a privilege that's not actively bad, like some you won't want to give out because they're actively bad. So, for example, banal lordship, terrible. You don't want to give this out because it's effective, it's actively bad. But if you pretend that none of this part below exists, because you really do care about trend, you care about being able to shift your values, and you care about not getting this max control. But if it was just 5 satisfaction for 50% power, you would want to give this out. And the nobility is going to be the estate that you probably want to be the least aggressive about handing stuff out on. But so many of these also give just really strong effects, or you really like the effect that they are having on your country in terms of their trend, what you give for values. And so what the error is in terms of evaluation is really caring about this power percentage. Because you either want to have basically 0 privileges, or you want to have a lot, and the cost of having 0 privileges is too high because there's too many good things in estate privileges. Stuff like, a plus 10% tax efficiency, such that you can kind of be a little bit more passive with the nobility, but really, especially with the burghers and the commoners, you want to be giving out as much as you can, as much as your values will allow, and not be too concerned with the power that they are sapping from the crown. You can, to some extent, try and slow down or pump the brakes if you are under 25% crown power, because that's an important break point. But if you are well above 25% crown power, being passive about handing out privileges when the satisfaction alone is going to be worth it is, I think, a big mistake that a lot of people are making, being scared of this plus 50%, because when you get down to the math of it, it is going to be the case that it is not going to move the needle too much. So we see 21% crown power if we were at 400%, 23.5% crown power. It's moving crown power by 2.5% for one full one of these. There's a flip side to this. If we give out a whole bunch of privileges, or the equivalent of a whole bunch of privileges, which this is maybe kind of a reasonable percentage spread if you're giving out a lot of the things, you see the crown power is really low. But 60%, that's not a lot of modifier. The flip side of this is the more modifiers you have on the estate privileges, also, the more valuable crown power modifiers become. So if we move this up to 150%, let's say by giving out a commanding kind of 25% from having a crown power character be in charge of the army, 25% from crown power character in charge of the navy, and 25% from the crown power in charge, or the crown characters in charge of all of the cabinet slots. So let's say we move up to 150%. That brings us up a whopping 7%. So the corollary to this is the more estate privileges you have out, the more valuable crown power modifiers will also be for you, because it is going to be a ratio, or it's relational. And so this is an important idea, I think, as well, is that after you give out a lot of these privileges, this makes crown power modifiers very valuable, but also your crown power modifiers are going to have diminishing marginal returns. We gained 90% there, almost 100%, and we moved up from 17% to a 20, let's call it 25%, right? So we gained roughly 8%. If we gained another 100%, we're still going to gain a lot, but it's going to be a little bit less than it was before. And the more and more we get of this, the less powerful a modifier is going to be. Let's double the modifier, which is not going to... Actually, let's bring it up to 400%. Let's say it is going to move the needle less. Even though we moved it 150%, we still got around 8%, which is what we got before. But it is still going to be robust as long as you are getting an amount that is less than you have out for the estates. It's still going to be robust, but it is going to have diminishing returns. You see, this one's only going to move it 4 or 5%, this last 100% here. So it is going to kind of just understanding how the math is going to be working on this can help for understanding why giving out a lot of privileges is going to be really good. Unless the privileges are actively bad, you often want to give them out. If they have plus 100% power and they're on the nobility, you can kind of pump the brakes a little bit, but even then you usually want to be giving these out for the nobility satisfaction so that you can tax more, so that you can have a bigger margin, and these types of things will allow you to have a very profitable thing going on as well. Also, tax efficiency on the burger is very valuable, or that privilege specifically. So that is the video. When we introed it, we actually have a longer list of mistakes, but it took us a little bit of time to get through these, so we're going to just make this video top mistakes that are government and macroeconomics, and only show the ones of those that we have recorded here, where a big focus is going to be on the control, the market access, and kind of another function of the control, or related to the control, is the importance of crown power. We talked about crown power a little bit more. It is important, and it is also important to note that lack of control will decrease local crown power, and this modifier in terms of the math, when you don't have a lot of crown power, is extraordinarily nasty. And so this is an important thing to keep in mind as it relates to control in the early game. Anyways, a little bit tired of doing the normal outro, so instead I'll just show you a video of me squatting over 600 pounds.